Chapter 2 Rat Friends. A lot of things happened during the spring festival this year, and Huguo's case of cheating his uncle out of money was finally revealed, and his uncle was angry, and he couldn't afford to get sick, and he died in less than 3 days. The relatives and friends of the Hu family all guarded him like a thief, not to mention lending him money, and they didn't even let him rub a bite of leftovers. Huguo sold the last pair of sandalwood boxes in the family for 2 silver oceans, which were his mother's dowry, and he always wanted to keep a thought, but he was reluctant to pawn them. But when the addiction to cigarettes started, I couldn't care about that much, so I bought a small piece of Fusho paste with these $2, and rushed home to light a cigarette bubble and pour it on the bed, inhaled twice, and my body was as light as in the clouds. At this moment, he feels like a fairy, and the experiences of being looked down upon, insulted, and bullied on weekdays are not important. After 2 more puffs, he suddenly found that there was a black whirring thing on his broken bed, and when he looked closely, there was a big mouse lying on the corner of the bed. This mouse must not be young, his beard has turned white, and his body is about the same size as a cat, and it is sucking the smoke from Huguo's cigarette gun next to it, as if it also knows the benefits of this Fusho ointment. Sniffing its nose and enjoying it greedily. Huguo thought it was interesting and said to the big mouse, "You guy also has a smoking addiction? It seems that I am in the same way." Then he took a puff and spat at the mouse with his mouth, and the mouse, as if knowing that he had no ill will, and was not afraid of him, raised his head to receive the smoke that was being sprayed at it. After a while, it seemed that he was too addicted, and slowly crawled away. For several days, this big mouse came to smoke with Huguo every day. Huguo was despised everywhere, there was no half of friends around, and he had a good impression of this mouse. Sometimes the mouse came a little later, and Huguo endured the addiction to smoke and waited for it. But the good times didn't last long. Huguo was left with a bed and 4 walls in his house, and there was no money to buy tobacco and soil. He was depressed and helpless, and sighed and said to the mouse, "Mouse, mouse, today I am out of food, but I have no money to buy Fusho ointment. I am afraid I can't often smoke this smell with you." He sighed. The mouse listened to him, his eyes flashed, and he turned away thoughtfully. When it was dark, the mouse came back with a silver dollar and put it next to Huguo's pillow. Huguo was pleasantly surprised, and went into the city overnight to buy a piece of Fusho ointment. The next day, the mouse took 3 silver dollars in his mouth. Huguo was so happy that he didn't know what to say, and remembered an illusion he learned when he was in a private school, so he said to the mouse, "The one who knows the middle, Bao Shuya is also, you know that I am poor and generous to me, it is really my confidant, if you don't dislike it, we will become Jin Lan brothers." From then on, he called this mouse brother, and brother called him Brother Mouse. Ate together, smoked a lot together, and made a nest for it in bed with cotton wool, so that the mouse also slept on the bed. People and mice are at peace, no less than the friendship of Mo rebellion. The mice go out every day to bring back silver dollars, as little as 1 or 2, as many as 3 or 5, since then Huguo has no worries about food and clothing. Years later, my grandfather would recall that it was the happiest time of his life. After more than half a year, Huguo gradually became richer, but isn't there such a sentence? Fortune meets friends, bad luck touches villains, and Huguo is poor life. He was targeted by a villain. There is a scoundrel in the village named Wang Ergangzi. He is different from Huguo. Huguo was at least once rich, and he has been the young master Hu for more than 20 years. Wang Ergangzi didn't have such a good life. From his ancestors to his generation, he didn't wear a pair of pants that didn't show his cheeks. He saw that Huguo's family business was defeated, gloating, and scolded and insulted Huguo when he had nothing to do, bullied the young master Hu back then, and found some balance in his heart. Recently, he felt very strange. Huguo, a poor boy, didn't make a living. Everything he could pawn at home was pawned, and his relatives were almost dead. Why did he smoke at home every day? Where did he get all the money to buy tobacco? Maybe this kid has become a thief, so I might as well keep an eye on him quietly, and when he steals something, catch him and twist him and send him to the government for a few oceans of reward. But after staring for a while, I found that Huguohua basically stayed at home and never interacted with anyone, except for occasionally going into the city to buy some food and tobacco. The more he didn't know where his money came from, the more itchy Wang Gangzi became. One day, Huguohua went out to buy food, and Wang Gangzi took the opportunity to climb over the wall and enter his house, rummaging through boxes and cabinets to find out what Huguohua's secrets were. Suddenly found that there was a big mouse sleeping on the bed. Wang Gangzi grabbed the mouse and threw it into a pot of water that was boiling on the stove, and then pressed the lid of the pot, thinking that when Huguohua came home to drink water, I would have fun watching it next to me. Before Wang Erkong went out, Huguohua came back, just blocked him into the house. Huguohua saw the big mouse in the pot, had been scalded to death, suddenly red eyes, picked up the kitchen knife and chopped. Wang Erkong was cut more than a dozen knives. Fortunately, Huguohua is a big smoker. His hands are weak, although Wang Erkong was hit by a lot of knives, but he was not fatally injured. He fled to the security team for help with blood all over his body. The captain of the security team is a relative of a local warlord, and he was inviting this warlord to drink. The captain saw that this was repaid. Committing murder with a knife in broad daylight, is there no royal law? Hurriedly ordered a few subordinates to tie up Huguohua's flowers. Huguohua was escorted to the front of the hall, and the security captain shouted and asked, why did he kill Wang Erkong with a knife? Huguohua burst into tears, sobbing and recounting the whole story, and finally lamented and said, I thought I was in trouble and wanted to die. Without this mouse I would not be alive today, but I was negligent for a moment, and caused Brother Rat to die, although it was not killed by me, but because of me. Jiuchuan bears this good friend. How can I be embarrassed? I do things alone. Since I cut Wang Erkong, the killing and punishment are all subject to the fall. Just ask the chief to let me go home and bury my mouse brother. Even if I die, I will be blind. Before the security captain could speak, the warlord next to him sighed and said to Huguohua, his grandmother's is not ungrateful, not benevolent, not to live up to her heart is righteous, and she is still like this to mice, let alone to people. I read your benevolence and righteousness, and I see that you are helpless, so you will follow me to the army and become an adjutant in the future. The warlord leader instructed his subordinates to whip the king with a whip to Huguohua, and let Huguohua go home to bury the mouse. Huguohua buried the mouse in a wooden box, dug a pit and buried it, and cried for a long time, and then went to the warlord leader. As the saying goes, when you are hungry, eating bran is as sweet as honey, and when you are full, eating honey is not sweet. When a person is poor, others will be grateful to date even if they give him a bowl of porridge and a piece of cake. Not to mention that the mouse gave Huguohua so much money. Of course, the money of the mouse is also stolen. The sage said that he would die of thirst and not drink the water of the stolen spring, but that was the moral standard of the most holy and sage person, and it was difficult for the ancients to do it, let alone a mediocre person like Huguohua. I used to hear that smoking in the room will become addicted to flies and mice in the house after a long time, and this is true.